Hi students, welcome back to geology. We are in this next video learning about groundwater. All right, so your pondering question for this video: what happens to water after it moves underground? So in the last video, we talked about surface water infiltration and runoff, and now we are moving to underground. All right, so we're going to start with some groundwater 101. So I mentioned porosity in the last video. Again, this is the volume of open pore spaces between rock and soil. So this could be crevices, this could just be pore spaces or the spaces between the grains. This could be any other joint or cavity or fracture in the rock, anywhere water could fit. Okay, so open air where water can situate itself is porosity, pore spaces. So the higher the porosity, the higher the pore spaces. The higher the pore spaces, the higher the porosity. All right. Then looking at permeability, again, this is the measure of the material's ability to move the water or to transmit that water. Okay, so if something has good permeability, then that means that water can travel through it really well. So as I mentioned in the last video, we want the pore space and the permeability to be high so that water can flow through into the ground. All right, so let's look at the groundwater zones. So when we look at groundwater zones, it starts at the surface. So as water is infiltrating, that first zone that it falls in is called the zone of aeration. This is an area where there are open spaces where that open space can be filled with water or it can be filled with air. Okay, so it's a little bit of both. And water starts to move down via gravity towards the groundwater. Okay, capillary fringe happens right above where the water table sits, which is right above where groundwater is saturated. And this is a narrow zone where water is being pulled upward, defying gravity essentially. So it's defying gravity because nature, most things want to flow from an area of high pressure to low pressure. And after the water hits the water table, because it's a saturated zone, there's higher pressure there. And so there's a narrow zone where there's upward pull, but gravity ultimately wins and pulls the water down below the water table. The water table is the upper level of the saturated zone. And the zone of saturation or the saturated zone is where all available pore spaces are filled with water. And that's what we mark as where groundwater sits. All right, so water is sitting in what we call aquifers. Aquifers are basically storages of water underground that we can access. Okay, so for example, in Fresno, we have something called the Fresno Aquifer that sits somewhere around 150 feet below the Earth's surface in Fresno. So you dig 150 feet down, that's approximately where the water begins. So it's generally in some sort of permeable, so high permeability, rock or sediment that transmits water in a quantity great enough for us to use. So it's not considered an aquifer if there's not enough water for us to use it for anything. Okay. So we have a couple different types. We have confined aquifers, unconfined aquifers, aquatards, and aquicludes. Confined aquifers are confined by confining layers. So there's a layer that is not permeable that doesn't allow for the exchange between aquifers. A lot of people think this is a huge problem. We do have a confined aquifer deeper in Fresno. And fortunately, we have that confined aquifer because we've had some contamination to our upper aquifer. And so I did some work years ago on an area in Pinedale where there was a chlorinated solvent that was spilled, and the upper aquifer was contaminated for basically since the 70s, 80s is when they found it. And we were treating the upper aquifer, but we had to check the lower aquifer to make sure it didn't get down into that larger system. And fortunately, it didn't, because we have a confining layer that situates around, I think it's 250, 270 feet below the ground surface. So that lower aquifer is protected. Whereas if it was an unconfined aquifer, the water table is the top and it's affected. So our upper aquifer, unfortunately, is contaminated in the Pinedale region by this chlorinated solvent because it's an unconfined aquifer. Aquatards will retard the flow or slow the flow between aquifers. Ours is an aquiclude, which excludes the flow between aquifers. Okay. Depending on where we are in the United States, we are in the Central Valley, so we have a lot of unconsolidated sand or gravel. But depending on the rock available in the area, what's most common, that's where their groundwater is going to sit, what aquifer it's going to be in. Okay, so for example, we have a lot of carbonate rock in Texas and in Florida. We also have some semi-consolidated sand in those areas. We have glacial till in the Northeast, some volcanic rock in Oregon and Washington, Montana, Wyoming. Okay, so just depending on where you are in the United States, well, anywhere on Earth, the aquifer is going to look a little bit different. It's not always going to be just sand or gravel. Okay. When we are developing wells, we want to make sure that we are tapping the well above the surface level. So we have something called a pressure surface or a saturation level, and we want to make sure that either the elevation of the well is higher than that, or we are not tapping into a aquifer that is lower than the elevation of the ground surface where we're tapping in. Because what's going to happen is all that water is going to be pushed up and out of the well because of the pressure surface. And we use that to our advantage nowadays to move water around. So we use the pressure. So if you look at this diagram on the right there, upper right, you can see that the pressure surface where it says saturation level is higher than the elevation of where the well was put. And so what's going to end up happening is the water is going to push itself out and we get something called an artesian well. Those aren't nearly as common nowadays because we know a little bit more about the pressure surface. All right, then we look at hydrographs. So hydrographs are important when we're looking at wells. We can develop hydrographs for them over time, which show us the groundwater elevation over time. So by plotting the elevation of a particular well over time, we can see what groundwater is doing either annually or seasonally. And for example, we do see seasonal fluctuation. When we have extra precipitation, groundwater comes up a little bit. When we get over summer and we use a bunch of water, the groundwater lowers a little bit. In order to understand how water flows underground, we use something called Darcy's law. So in the 1800s, a French engineer named Henry Darcy developed a hypothesis to show how discharge through a porous medium is controlled by permeability, pressure, and cross-sectional area. So remember we talked about how water moves on the surface, whether it's got a smooth surface, a small channel, or high gradient, etc. Now we're looking underground at permeability, pressure, and cross-sectional area. And so Q is the flow, is basically the discharge. And we want to look at the hydraulic conductivity, so how quickly or well it's moving. So that's basically the permeability, the cross-sectional area or flow, whatever area you're looking at. The change in pressure head, which is the difference in elevation between one well and another well. And that's going to create a pressure head because they should be equal because water should, level itself out. But when we're looking at groundwater over distances, oftentimes there's a pressure head difference and we want to measure that. And then the difference between those two, the difference between or the relationship between the pressure head and the distance between the two, we call the hydraulic gradient. All right, so some practice calculating hydraulic gradients is here for you. So given the two scenarios below, calculate the hydraulic gradient between the following wells. So I have well sites, 5 well sites, groundwater elevation and distance to MW1. So you're just doing the relationship between MW1 and that well. So I'll give you a couple minutes, pause the video, and then the next slide will give you the answers. All right, so there are the answers for the hydraulic gradient. You're really just dividing the two. So you're taking the difference between groundwater elevation, which is the delta H, over the delta L, which is the distance. So if I back up to that other slide really quick, we're calculating delta H, which is the difference between their elevation measurements, over L, which is the distance between the two. Okay, so it's just groundwater elevation difference divided by the distance to MW1 to get those numbers. Okay. All right, so I mentioned earlier that we use that water pressure to help move water from one location to another. So you might notice these large water towers in certain areas around town. They're not as common anymore. We're using a lot more electric power to move the water, but these increase the elevation of the pressure surface, and so that allows for it to push water down and into buildings. So for example, at Fresno State, they have a really large water tower, and it raises their pressure surface so that that can just be pushed down and into buildings. Now, this doesn't work with really, really tall buildings because you have to have a giant water tower for that. But for smaller buildings, single story, maybe two-story, it works pretty good. All right, so in this video, we talked about how groundwater hosts most of the water we use on Earth. Remember from that first video, it's about 0.6% of our usable water on Earth, but we need porosity and permeability to recharge these aquifers in order for us to use that water. In your notes, I want you to write down what the difference between porosity and permeability is and why they are both important for groundwater recharge. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.